Welcome back to Run Like Hell, episode number 7. And today we're going to talk about magicians and illusionists. Because really, when we think of religion, pretty much all religion is illusions. And the deliverer is like a magician. They're giving the illusion. And the illusions could be anything from hellfire to living on earth forever, like the Jehovah's Witnesses preach. So there's a wide variety of illusions out there within all of the religions. In fact, if we study illusions, we all live an illusion. We all have an idea of what's going to happen next. So we kind of foretell the future a little bit inside our brains, and we plan our day and we foretell the future. And this is just how people work. This is how we all work. So taking it on a broad level, it's very natural for people to want to have illusions about Jesus' second coming and the end of days and all of these things. So over the late 1800s and during the 1800s, there were literally thousands of various illusionists forming various little sects and religions, all sprouting all over the world. And so it's interesting. So let's first of all look at magic. Magic relies on the powerful psychological illusions, and the magician creates their tricks by exploiting gaps and errors in our conscious experience. So this is what these religions do, and they do it today. For example, magicians use misdirection to manipulate what you attend to, and this allows them to control what you see and what you miss. So today we're going to take a look at just briefly three religions. We're going to take a look at, of course, the Jehovah's Witness. But during the Jehovah's Witness startup period, the Seventh-day Adventists were involved. And I also want to just take a brief look at the Mormonism, because Mormons started in earlier, a little bit earlier, but they started in the early 1800s. And I find all of these three religions are illusionists and magicians, and they presented certain suppositions that people went for. People bought into it. So it's quite interesting when we look at the history of how this all started. So people ask, how do illusions occur in psychology? Well, illusions occur because of a result of a mismatch between the physical stimuli and its perception by the individual. The mismatch is caused by incorrect interpretations of information received by sensory organs. So we are always having these mismatch, and so we always have illusions. You know, you get 100 people in a room and you ask all 100 of them what they saw, they'll all have a different story. We all build our own illusions. What happens to the brain during illusions? Your senses gather information and send it to your brain, but your brain does not simply receive the information, it creates your perception of the world. And this is where all these religions get people, because our brains create a perception of the world. This means that sometimes your brain fills in gaps when there's incomplete information, or it creates an image that isn't even there. And isn't that what religions do? They create these images that aren't even there. It's their own suppositions. That's what they all do. So let's just carry on a little further. Do illusions work on everyone? No. If you struggle to see a hidden image in a single image stereogram, you may have discovered that not everyone experiences visual illusions in the same way. For some illusions, some people simply cannot see the effect. So Jehovah's Witnesses go door to door and people slam the door. Out of 100 calls, probably 99% you get slammed, and people don't have time for it. They don't see the illusion. These illusions that these religions are putting out, they're getting old, and they're not working anymore. Now, how is a person's brain fooled by the optical illusion? One theory that researchers have put forth is that some illusions cause us to be fooled because they capitalize on the way the brain constantly tries to make predictions about what will happen next in order to compensate for the small lag time between when an event happens and our ability to perceive it. So this thing in our brain that's always making predictions makes it easy for us to grab onto a magician's illusions, like Russell and some of the other first century illusionists. that we'll talk about. Now, cognitive illusions are a result of our conceptions and assumptions about the world, which we impose upon visual stimuli. And it talks about four types. The last two types are fictions and cognitive illusions, and they both need image source. So they both need images brought in. And we'll note from the very first Watchtower that Russell put out, he had pictures drawn. And from the very beginning of time, um, these illusionists have been using pictures in their articles and their print material to work on that sensory gap where people want to know what's going to happen in the future. So people grab onto that, they grab onto this guy's ideas, and they run with it. And they love pictures. So you notice the Watchtower today uses tons and tons of pictures. In fact, a lot of people don't even read, they just read the pictures. So now, how do illusions affect behavior? Just as optical illusions can fool the eye to present a distorted image of reality, moral illusions can fool our decision-making ability, making us more selfish. Now, I thought about that, and if we look at the Jehovah's Witness religion on blood transfusions, this is an illusion that we're not supposed to have blood transfusions. They created this illusion, and this illusion is to keep their followers in that they're different and that the whole world's wrong and that they're right. And this is one of the illusions in the religion. But how can this be dangerous? Well, if I have a child that is on the deathbed and needs a blood transfusion and I'm refusing as a parent to give it, I could cause that child's death over my selfishness, over this illusion. So illusions can be dangerous. Now, we're going to take a look at a few scriptures to support these why these illusions are not biblically based. But first of all, let's go to some of the first century illusionists and see how they started. Okay, so now we're going to look at what was happening during the 1800s when Russell started the religion. And what was going on, there was what they called a Second Great Awakening. The Second Great Awakening was a Protestant religious revival during the early 19th century in the United States. This spread to religions. It was all emotional preaching. There was a number of Reformation movements. Revivals were a key part of the movement and attracted hundreds of converts to the new Protestant denominations. The Methodist Church used circuit riders to reach people in frontier locations. The Second Great Awakening led to a period of antebellum social reform and an emphasis on the salvation by institutions. The outpouring of religious fever and revival began in Kentucky and in Tennessee in the 1790s and early 1800s among Presbyterian, Methodists, and Baptists. It led to the founding of several well-known colleges, seminaries, and mission societies. So some of the new religious movements that emerged during the Second Great Awakening, such as the Adventism, Dispensationalism, and Latter-day Saint movement. So we'll look at a few of these. So the first one I want to look at is Joseph Smith. And remember, during these, at that time in history, there was a lot of snake oil salesmen, and they just put potions in bottles and sell it, and people would buy it, and there was no regulation. So there was a lot of stuff happening. This is a really booming part of history, if you can imagine, for religion especially. So Joseph Smith here, he was from a poor family, and but he was a young guy. He had some health challenges, and he was on crutches, and he only lived 14 years after he started the movement. But so if you can imagine, he was on crutches. He was one of these kids that didn't move around a lot, but he read a lot, and he ended up writing a book. And he wrote this Book of Mormon, which he claimed was given to him. But it's interesting, and he was one of the illusionists. Now, he was a young man of 24 when he created this illusion that these gold plates were given to him, so he got this Book of Mormon. Well, he was a good writer, and this book was really well written, and he has just a phenomenal story. So everyone went out gold hunting for these golden tablets. They believed him. He was such a good illusionist. and they believed him and they sunk money into it. And he brought money into the family. They were a poor family suffering. They were about to lose their farm or something. And here's what happened. In 1826, Smith was brought before a Chenango County court for glass looking or pretending to find lost treasure. The result of the proceedings remains unclear, as primary sources report various conflicting outcomes. So here he was convicted of a scandal, and he actually had to go to court for it. He was a young man. So it got thrown out of court. There wasn't enough proof. And up came the Book of Mormon. And in the book, one of the illusions that he put forth is that man could have polygamous wives, many wives. And so, of course, a lot of the men really thought this was cool, and they liked that religion, and it grew. But the young man he died at 38. He only lived 14 years after he wrote that book. But man, was it a good illusion, because that religion today is probably pushing 20 million people, 14 million for sure. Now, let's take a look at the Seventh-day Adventist group. This is an interesting group. It started with the Millerite movement, and the Millerites were followers of the teachings of William Miller, who in 1831 first shared publicly his belief that the second advent of Jesus Christ would occur in roughly the year 1843 to 1844, coming during the Second Great Awakening. And his teachings were widely spread, and they grew. So the Millerites grew, and you notice what their illusion was? End times, end time dates. End time dates work. So this was his first illusion that he threw out, 1843, for end time dates. And of course, they got a movement going, a lot of people. And these guys have money, and they had money to do the revivals and get this all going, and they grew. And during the mid-19th century, it was formally established in 1863. And Ellen G. White, you might recognize that name. And some of their things are the Sabbath, holding it on Saturdays. And so they did these end time predictions. That's what built the religion. That's what got everything going. These are illusions. And these illusionists throw this out, these end time dates, and they're very smart. So they calculate it from Daniel, and they show all their calculations. But of course, it's always wrong. But they sell a whole lot of books. And so could you imagine right now, I make an end time date, and I'm really good at it, and I put it into a book, and I get it out there, and it looks really good, and all these things are coming true, kind of. Everyone buys it. You see, everyone wants to know when the end is going to be for some reason. But we're going to talk about that in a bit. But anyways, the Seventh-day Adventist was another illusionist, and they teamed up with Charles Taze Russell. Barber was one of the Seventh-day Adventist guys. And you see, Russell, he came from a very wealthy family, so it was kind of opposite of Joseph Smith. So Russell was a child of wealth, and he was 18 when he got involved with religion with his dad, and they did some Bible groups. And he was 24 years old by the time he went up against Barber, this older guy. And they went up in debates, and they were debating certain things. And so they teamed up for 2 years, and they set 1878 as the end of times. They thought 1878. Him and Barber both were predicting. So Barber's first prediction didn't fall through with the Adventists. And so they teamed up and they set 1878. It was going to be the end, and they put some money behind it. They threw seminars, and they used coal porters, which were like newspaper deliveries, and they had stacks of deliveries on this, and they were selling this date, 1878. Well, of course, the date didn't happen. Nothing happened. Barber split, and he went his own way, and they disagreed on some issues, with the Bible in their debates. So up here, Charles Taze Russell, he's only 24 now. By this time, he's 26. And he split, and now he starts his own religion at 26 years old. Now, he sold the family business at that time for $7.6 million, and in today's wealth, that's worth $205 million equivalent. So he had a $200 million sitting in his bank, like in today's value, and he was used to working with his dad running businesses, textile, all over the world. But now, instead of shipping fabric all over the world and textiles, all their money went into shipping paper and his whatever he wrote. So obviously, some very, very smart young people at 26 years old writing to a degree that people are following his writings. Now, he's a young illusionist. Guess what he used? End of time dates, 1878. That was his first one. And when that didn't happen, then he went on to make another one and then another one. And in Russell's lifetime, 42 years that he was at it from that time, he wrote 50,000 pages of writings into books that went out and got sold. And one of his biggest concerns was the money coming from his writings. And he was always tracking the money. And it was all about money. And he was a young guy, 26. Could you imagine sinking everything into printing presses and so on and so forth, calling it the Watchtower, printing, whatever. And he went up against Barber. And of course, Barber, the Seventh-day Adventist religion, something like 21 million today. They have hospitals all over. They help a lot of people. So they went in a completely different route. And they went more to helping people, and they had certain beliefs. But the end times was their big rouge. It was their big illusion. And it still is with the Jehovah's Witness today. And with most of these religions, it's end times dates, except the Mormons, it was golden tablets given by the angel Maury. But Charles Taze Russell, a very interesting guy at that age, he wrote 3 pages daily. He had to write 3 pages daily to hit 50,000 pages. And we'll take a look at some of his writings. It's quite interesting. And we'll see how he used illusions to fool people right in their writings. Now, one thing I want to make note of, any of these illusionists like Houdini and some of these famous people that can float and things like that, it's all about money. You have to pay to go and see them. The same is true of these religions. You would have to pay to go and learn about them. You're either going to buy their books, you're either going to give contributions, and we'll get into how they work you for money. It was all about money. Illusionists is about money. And if you go to Vegas, you can watch illusionists. That might cost you $150 a ticket. And you go in, but you're going in knowing that your mind's going to get tickled. Like you actually know it. So you walk out and you say, hey, that was a good $150 to tickle my mind. But with these religions, they are using illusions as real, as coming from God. And we'll show you from the Bible how serious that is to God. But to these guys, it was just about money. And they kind of believe their own stuff, I think, as well. You know how we are when you're young, you have these ideas, you wake up, hey, I got an idea. Especially if you're a creative type person, you'll have all kinds of ideas. And these guys just wrote suppositions. So now we'll get into Russell. Let's do a deep dive into his illusions, the Jehovah's Witnesses, and let's look at how they started some of the greatest illusions of this century. Okay, so just hang in there. Okay, welcome back. We are looking at the 1916 edition of the Watchtower, the Herald of Christ's Presence. So this is the illusionists, one of their weapons or one of their illusions they use is they get the audience to believe that this magazine here is from God. So he had, by 1906, he had 27,000 subscribers. And in them days, you had to have coal porters to run these magazines around. And it cost, there was a cost involved. It wasn't like going on the internet and hitting subscribe. So these subscribers, they would subscribe to the Watchtower. There was a cost. And at that time, the Watchtower was selling for $1 a year to get a subscription. Unless you were some remote land, there was one where it was like $7 an edition. And then they quit printing for another land because it wasn't worth it, Russell said. It was all about money. These are all spreadsheets. So they would sell this magazine for $1 a year. And in them days, $1 a year to our standards, if you do the conversion, is like $27. So it'd be like you buying a magazine subscription for $27, and every month you'd get this 15-page Watchtower. And you'd read through this Watchtower, and it's a regurgitation of the same thing over and over again. And they put everything in it. They put a lot of stuff in it. Now I'm just going to show you a few things in this Watchtower. We're going to go to page 25, and there they admit all about the false dates. Like, they're very clear about it. And this 1916 edition is kind of it's a special edition because Russell died in 1916. So this was a recap kind of his life. So here it's and most likely Rutherford. Well, it says Rutherford had a hand in detailing this 1916 because he took over. He was the legal representative. We'll talk about him in another video coming up. But Russell said, and this was his illusion all the way through, and he wrote so many books. We're going to take a look at all the books he wrote and all the books he sold over these illusions. Now, during the harvest of age, the Lord, through his word, has seemed to send his people to 4 different points of time: 1874, 1878, 1881, and 1914. And those are all end time dates. And Russell was born in 1852. And so he started writing these Millennial Dawn series books. He wrote 6 of them, and the last one was half done when he died, and Rutherford finished the rest of it. At each of these points of time, the watching saints who realized that the end of the age was upon the church have thought that the change might come. And this is what it's saying. And it goes on to say they watched for it. And when they came to each of those points, the Lord said, go to another place. Finally, we reached the last place of the 4, October 1st, 1914. This was the last point of the time that the Bible chronology pointed out to us relating to the church's experiences. Did the Lord tell us that we would be taken there? No. What did he say? His word and the fulfillments of prophecy seem to point unmistakably that this date marked the end of Gentile times. Now, they had this end figured out so many other times. We inferred from this that the church's change would take place on or before that date. But God did not tell us that it would be so. He permitted us to draw that inference. And we believe that it has proven to be a necessary test upon God's dear saints everywhere. So they're saying all these end time dates is part of how God was testing them. What an illusion. This is the biggest illusion, that the end time dates are part of God testing us. So now let's go on and see how much money this guy made. We're going to go to page 178. And here's all the millions of copies of books. Now, keeping in mind, this guy was rich. You know, he had something like $200 million in today's standards. So he built a great big printing factory and put it all under the Watchtower. And these are all the books he wrote. He penned 50,000 pages in his lifetime. That's like 3 pages a day. But he wrote these books, Food for Thinking, Christians, Tabernacle Shadows, like and the distribution was like 1.5 million, a million for this other one, Divine Plan of Ages, 4.8 million. That's what he sold. And these books sold, and these books were not selling. They were selling for currency of upwards of like $7, $9. I was doing, some of the books were selling like $27 for some of the covered books. So he had quite the thing going on with selling his books. And I found that this whole Watchtower, there's 204 pages to all these Watchtowers for that year, 1916. I was reading through them all. And it's just one big spreadsheet. He has everyone, imagine this, he has, by 1916, he had 50,000 subscriptions. Everyone's paying $1 a year. And they're just pumping out their big spreadsheet. It's a big illusion, and they think that they're getting God's words. Now, you want to know what they do with this illusion? Okay, it's in the 1906 article. I thought this was interesting. This one was 10 years earlier, this one I was reading. And on page 214, 14, they talk about the cost of sinners, and I thought this was interesting. The cost of conversions. The value of a genuine conversion from sin to the Lord to saintship to a membership in the little flock of the footstep followers of the Lamb is almost beyond estimation. This is what Russell was telling them. And he went on to say he found that the average ranges from $27 in villages. So this is like 700 and some dollars a person in these small villages to $212 in the cities. And $212 would be equivalent to about $5,000 in our time. And he says in larger church costs, it's greatly increased. And he references this one guy. And this Indianapolis church, $620 in their currency. So that's like 60 some thousand bucks to pull a heathen in and make them into a Christian. So could you imagine that? He's charging people $1 a year to, like, that's a lot of money, $27 a year to get this magazine in. And here he's pumping in stuff like this, and it costs a lot of money. You know, we have to spend a lot of money to bring these heathens in. So basically what he's saying is we need lots of money. We need you as a subscriber to start donating. And then the donations just went up. You read the spreadsheet, it's all about donations. So these are all about donations. I like some of this stuff I'm going to save for another time. But I think for what we have on Russell, he was certainly an illusion. Welcome back. Now it's nice to give the Bible an opportunity to do a scriptural rebuttal for these illusionists. So we're going to take a look at a scripture we've looked at in all our videos that describes these men, these illusionists that are using the Bible to perform works that are out of this world. You know, they're given visions and things that are come in time dates. Well, here's what the Bible says in 2 Corinthians 11, chapter 13 to 15. For such men are false apostles. They're deceitful workmen, disguising themselves as apostles of Christ. And no wonder, for even Satan disguises himself as an angel of light. So it's no surprise if his servants also describe themselves as servants of righteousness. And this is what we see with all of these illusionists that are using the Bible to tell their story and to make money. 2 Peter, number 1, in first chapter, verse 20. Knowing this, first of all, that no prophecy of Scripture comes from someone's own interpretation. So there it is, right in the Bible, whether it's Russell, whether it's Joseph Smith, whether it's the Miller family, all their end dates didn't work. And then it goes on to say, for no prophecy was ever produced by the will of a man. And so we can't will it. We can't say that this is what we believe, and so that's what it is. We can't will this stuff. So, and the Bible's already written, and the prophets have already spoken. So now we go to the biggest illusion that the Jehovah's Witnesses are using to this very day, and this is the one that Russell started. Who then is the faithful and wise servant whom his master set over his household to give them their food at the proper time? Now, we debunked this on another video, and this is an illustration, a parable. Jesus gave it to his disciples. Food is physical as well. We see in the book of James that we have a responsibility to look after the afflicted ones, the orphans and the widows, and the Jehovah's Witnesses have never done that, and they never will. Their wise servant is about selling literature, and it's about the Watchtower. Now, in the dark, I have all the scriptures that they don't show anybody, like concerning the day and hour. No one knows, not even the angels of the heaven. But yet they know all these end time dates. So what does that tell you? They use, in the same chapter, they use the end times, the wars, reports of wars. So they make all these Armageddon pictures, and they sell that to the world. The end's here. Well, they've been saying that, religions have been saying that since day one. Now let's go to Ecclesiastes. When we think of all the books that you've seen, the millions of copies of books that Russell wrote and put out, 50,000 pages in his lifetime, here's the warning in the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 12, verses 12 to 13. My son, beware of anything beyond the Bible. Of making many books, there is no end, and much study is a weariness of the flesh. So we think of all those Armageddon pictures, it's a weariness to our flesh. We don't need those pictures. It's part of the illusion. It just makes us uh, irritated. It's not good for people to think the end's coming tomorrow when it's not. These are all false prophets. And in verse 13, the end of the matter, all has been heard, is fear God and keep his commands. And here the Jehovah's Witnesses don't even agree with the 10 commands. They say in their publications, and I showed this in other videos, that they don't follow the 10 commands. They don't apply to us. So those were God's commands directly. So fear them. And then Jesus said to love our neighbor, love God. So the Bible's not a complicated thing. We don't need all these books, all these suppositions from men to understand the Bible. The Bible's complete within itself. It has everything within it. All we have to do is get to know how to use it. So I like this one. Numbers chapter 23, verse 19. God is not a man, he will not lie. God is not a human being, his decisions will not change. If he says he will do something, then he will do it. If he makes a promise, then he will do what he promised. So that says it all. All these end time dates are not God's. These men are false prophets making money off the Bible. Now, the last scripture I want to use is the very last scripture in the Bible. If you go to the last book of the Bible, Revelation, chapter 22, verse 18, here's what it says. I warn everyone who hears the words of the prophecy of this book. If anyone adds to them, God will add to him the plagues described in this book. And if anyone takes away from the words of this book of his prophecy, God will take away his share in the tree of life and in the holy city, which are described in this book. He who testifies to these things, surely I am coming soon. Amen. Come. So this is what Jesus is saying in verse 20. We testify to these things that Jesus is coming. It's really that simple. The Bible is not complicated. We don't need all these books. We don't need a continual supply of Watchtower magazines with all these pictures programming illusions into our brains. And these Watchtower magazines that have been pumped out since Russell's day, because it hasn't changed, it's exactly the same thing today. So these magazines that are pumped out are part of the master illusionist. And all of the Jehovah's Witnesses, if you talk to all of them, because I was one for 30 years, all of them believe that the Watchtower is an extension of the Bible. Isn't that sad? But yet here in the Bible, it says God, if you add to it, God will take away your share. It's very clear. So we let the Bible do its own debunking. I think the Bible did a good job in exposing all these illusionists and false prophets and all this literature, all these books, these many books that are out there and are printed. We haven't even gone into Rutherford and all the books he printed, but the many pages of books printed to explain the Bible, but really to explain the illusion is what's happening. So, like I said before, many of these illusionists take their trickery right to their grave. And Russell took the faithful slave right to the grave. Okay, so for the last part of the program, we are going to create an illusion. And the illusion I want to create is right here. It's are there parallel universes mathematically possible? So have you ever looked at that, all these different theories? So I like this one about the parallel universes. It says here, but it is entirely possible according to the strange rules of quantum mechanics. The reason that this can happen is that the space of possibilities in quantum mechanics is huge. Mathematically, a quantum mechanical state is a sum or supposition of all possible states. So let's take that supposition and let's visit, as the Bible talks about, it talks about different realms or different states of being. And Jesus was on earth and he says, well, if you're Good, you're gonna go up to heaven. So that's a state. So what's heaven? What does heaven look like? Well, who knows? Maybe it's another parallel universe. And then he says, if you're not good, you're going to go there into the pits of Gehenna. So, what does that look like? What does that state of being look like? Perhaps it's another parallel universe. Perhaps it's right here. And we are in this universe, and it's a testing universe. And we're in this vessel, this body, and we spend whatever time we have to be tested. And based on the tests that we get in this plane of existence determines our next plane of existence. So come with me I'm going to take you on 3 planes of existence. And all of these planes defy what we know as our physical laws today. So it'll be a bit of an illusion. So here we go. I'd like you to join me, and we're going to go for a walk. We're going to leave this space, and we're going to slip through a portal. And when we come out, we're going to be in this space. So what do you think of this? Is this not a little bit like paradise? So, but this is what we get, maybe if we're good. I don't know. Paradise. This is what we think about in a physical being. Now, join me for this space. Slip out. Oh, wow. You don't want to be in this place for too long, do you? Okay, well, let's get the hell out of here. Oh, sorry. Well, I hope you enjoyed the ride, and if you did, please subscribe. And until next time, keep living your life with love. Bye for now.